everyone. My name is Kim Smith, and this is my audience for my second informative speech. What do you think of when you hear the word cheerleading? Do you think only of airheaded girls in tight tops and short skirts, participating in a dangerous sport? Would it surprise you to know that most of the stereotypes contained in the previous sentence are just that, stereotypes? Many of the ideas that people have about cheerleading are based on misguided notions they've obtained through the portrayal of cheerleading in popular television and films, such as Friday Night Lights and the Bring It On franchise. For example, I'm sure many of you do not know that although 97% of participants today are female, cheerleading actually started as a male-only activity. In fact, some of the most famous cheerleaders are men, including Dwight Eisenhower, Franklin Roosevelt, and Samuel L. Jackson. Another interesting misconception, and the topic of much debate, is that cheerleading is actually not a sport, at least not technically. These are just a few examples that illustrate how little some people actually know. Tonight I hope to clarify some of these fallacies by informing you about cheerleading's history, its risks, and potential benefits. Cheerleading actually began way back in the 1860s, in some form or another, when students in Great Britain would cheer and chant in unison for their favorite athletes. The official start of cheerleading is said to be on November 6th of 1869. This was at the world's actually first intercollegiate football game between Princeton and Rutgers, and this was where the original Sis Boom Rah cheer originated. A guy named Mark Peebles, a graduate of Princeton, took these, what they call Princeton cheers, when he moved to Minnesota and brought them to the University of Minnesota. Then, on November 2nd, 1898, the world's first official organized cheer took place. This was directed by a student named Johnny Campbell at the University of Minnesota. Johnny Campbell was known as the world's first official cheerleader. Cheerleading began as a team activity also at the University of Minnesota, where they had what was called a yell team. This was comprised of 6 male students, which included Johnny Campbell. They wore matching collared shirts, slacks, and a belt. Yell teams later became prominent at many Ivy League schools. In fact, some introduced them into their curriculum, where students could try out for credit. This particularly took place at Stanford. In 1903, the first cheerleading fraternity was formed, Gamma Sigma. And in 1905, Texas A&M created the Cheerleading State, which was a group of males who led the crowd at football and basketball games. It wasn't until 1923 that women first joined cheerleading. Happened to take place at the University of Minnesota. The cheerleaders wore ankle-length wool skirts, collared shirts, and sweaters. Definitely a far cry from what you see today. The cheerleaders also were not accepted based on their skills. They were voted in by their peers based on popularity. In 1940s, women joined in large numbers when men went off to fight in the war. From there, the next prominent movement in cheerleading came from Lawrence Herkimer, who was known as the grandfather of cheerleading. He was a former cheerleader at Southern Methodist University, and in 1948 created the National Cheerleaders Association, where he hosted the first ever cheer camp in the summer of 1949. He also formed the first uniform supply company, was inventor of the Herky, which if any of you know is a jump that you do, that I will not demonstrate right now. Herkimer also was the inventor of the Spirit Stick. He first introduced it in 1949 at his camp to award the group that was obviously the most spirited. Another important introduction in cheerleading came with poms. They were obviously an accessory to improve showmanship and attract crowd attention. They actually were first introduced in the 1930s and were made of tissue paper. You can imagine how well that went, especially in wind, rain, snow. In 1953, Lawrence Herkimer actually developed a pom that had a hidden handle, which is still used today. And then in 1965, a man named Fred Gastoff developed the modern pom, which was made using plastic streamers. Also in the 1950s, cheerleading is introduced in high schools. In the 1960s, the International Cheerleading Foundation is formed, and in 1967, they began annually ranking and awarding the top performing college teams. In 1967, Pop Warner was formed, which made cheerleading possible for children as young as 5. Pop Warner is still around today. It's the largest youth cheerleading program around. I'm actually a coach in Pop Warner. Pop Warner is a great program that requires children to maintain minimum scholastic grades and academic requirements to participate. And then professional cheerleading actually came around in the 1950s, although many don't realize that. The first recorded squad was for the Baltimore Colts back in 1954, although cheerleading really became popular professionally in 1976 when the Cowgirls performed at Super Bowl X halftime show, making it the first time ever that cheerleading appeared on national television. Professional cheerleading eventually spread to most major sports, including baseball, hockey, soccer, and overseas they even have cheerleaders for cricket. In 1980s, the high schools actually began competing, and in 1983, ESPN broadcast the first televised high school cheerleading competition. 1986 and 1987 saw the beginnings of All-Star Cheerleading, which was created by the NCA, the National Cheerleading Association. All-Star Cheerleading is not affiliated with any particular sports league or school. In the late 1990s, ESPN actually declared cheerleading a sport, although it's not recognized as a sport by any other institution. Today, cheerleading exists in 79 countries that include Australia, Great Britain, France, China, as well as the United States. There's an estimated 4.5 million participants worldwide and over 3.4 million in the US alone. Unfortunately, as with any sport, as the number of participants increases, so do the associated risks, most namely injuries, and cheerleading is no exception. As far as the most serious injuries, catastrophic injuries such as concussions, spinal fractures, traumatic head injuries, cheerleading actually only had 62 recorded catastrophic injuries in a 10-year period from 2001 to 2011, according to the National Center for Catastrophic Sports Injury Research's 2011 report. Football, on the other hand, had 358. In addition, cheerleading had only one death over this 10-year period. And although collegiate cheerleading accounts for 70.5% of all female catastrophic injuries and high school cheerleading accounts for 65.2%, the numbers are not as severe as they may seem. In terms of ER visits, there were just below 37,000 documented visits in 2011 for females ages 6 to 22. This is according to the Consumer Product Safety Commission. Cheerleading, in terms of ER visits, ranks below both soccer and softball, and has far less than half of ER visits for the number one sport, which was basketball, which has almost 95,000 ER visits in 2011 alone. In addition, from 1980 to 2007, the number of hospital visits for cheerleading did increase from just under 5,000 to almost 27,000. But these numbers are hospital visits altogether, not just emergency room visits. In terms of injuries overall, the average injury rate, they base it on injury rate per 1,000 athletic exposures, which includes any sort of practice, game, competition. So cheerleading has an average of 1 to 2.8 injuries per 1,000 athletic exposures, depending on which source you cite. High school in particular ranks actually 17th out of 20 sports, both boys and girls, in terms of injuries. This is according to the Nationwide Children's Hospital study. And the most common injury in cheerleading is actually a simple sprain or strain. According to the Pediatrics Journal, 52% of all injuries are a sprain or a strain, most notably the ankle or the wrist. The causes of injury in cheerleading are due to the high demands on the musculoskeletal system, the potential to fall from a significant height, and the practice surface. Cheerleaders practice on all kinds of surfaces: hardwood, grass, mats that aren't that thick. And other causes include the repetitive nature of cheerleading. Cheerleaders practice over and over the same stunts, the same gymnastics, for periods of 2 to 3 hours a night, multiple times a week. It has been noted that when fatigued, ligaments and bones experience significant stress and strain, which lessens their ability to provide shock absorption. In addition, the landing mechanisms of females versus males are very different, which affects how the body absorbs energy and force. For example, when dismounting from a stunt or when landing a gymnastics move. The flex position of the hip, knee, and ankle is what allows the muscles, rather than the joints, to absorb most of the force. And in females, they actually tend to take a more erect position, whereas males tend to be flexed. Some suggestions for reducing injuries. The most important one is to recognize cheerleading as a sport. Cheerleading is not currently recognized as a sport by the National Collegiate Athletic Association, and only 35 states recognize it at the high school level as of 2014. Basically, recognizing cheerleading as a sport would allow for it to have more certified trainers, coaches that are trained, qualified, and mandatory reporting of injuries. A study done by the American Journal states that there is actually 40% decrease in injuries that have been shown when trained coaches are present. In addition, a 2009 report in the Journal of Athletic Training cited that over 50% of high school cheerleading squads did not have a certified trainer on hand. So what actually defines a sport? The one element that critics cite that cheerleading does not have is that the primary purpose must be competition against or with an opponent. Another thing that critics cite is the subjectivity of the competitions that cheerleaders participate in. Their scores are based on human judgment and not an actual earning of a point or a touchdown, anything like that. The American Academy of Pediatrics and the American Association of Cheerleading Coaches and Administration both support recognizing cheerleading as a sport. In 2006, additional safety rules and training were put into place. It was a joint effort by the American Academy, or the American Association of Cheerleading Coaches, as well as the National Collegiate Athletic Association. Since then, catastrophic injuries had actually dropped from 12 to 1 in the 2011 season, and overall injuries at the college level have decreased by 50%. This goes to show that there is some hope for recognizing cheerleading as a sport and reducing the risk of injury. And although it is evident that the risk of cheerleading-related injuries has been decreasing, the numbers are still high enough to be alarming to some. So then why do parents let their children participate in cheerleading? Cheerleading has many benefits. There are physical benefits, which include cheerleading is obviously a source of exercise. It's a strenuous routine of workouts that are practiced multiple times a week. This includes heavy lifting, bending, running, stretching. Cheerleading helps improve muscle strength and flexibility, stamina, and cardiovascular endurance. It also has been shown to improve your posture, your coordination, and your balance. I think the American Association of Cheerleading and Administrators actually sums it up best when they say that cheerleading involves skills that require the strength of football, the grace of dance, and the agility of gymnastics. In addition to the physical benefits, cheerleading also offers mental benefits, which include increased confidence, self-esteem, and pride. Cheerleaders gain this confidence from learning to master difficult moves, assisting their teammates, and performing well at games and competitions. They're also considered a role model for the school and the community. They help cheer the team to victory, and they also they learn to practice, they learn persistence, dedication, discipline, and hard work. These, along with focus, which is obtained through cheerleading, actually carries over into the classroom. It can lead to better performance at school. And the National Cheerleaders Association states that 82% of cheerleaders actually maintain a grade point average of a B or higher, which some schools do require this, but nonetheless, cheerleaders are obviously still obtaining that. The other kinds of benefits that cheerleaders obtain are social benefits. They learn teamwork, they learn sportsmanship, especially at competitions, where they obviously compete against other squads. They learn goal setting. They learn to trust each other. It's nothing more important than trust when you're putting a girl 10 feet up in the air. There's also communication and respect towards those in authority positions. This, again, is something that carries over into school, into their home life. Cheerleaders also learn leadership skills, especially those that are promoted to captain or even just through everyday interaction with other cheerleaders. They also form lifelong friendships and have a sense of community among the parents of their friends on the squad, the coaches, everybody. Although this list is not all-encompassing, it is apparent that cheerleading provides a wide variety of benefits, which have the potential to shape participants into well-rounded individuals. These benefits have developed over time as cheerleading has transformed into what it is today. As with benefits, the evolution that has occurred since the late 19th century has also had an effect on injuries as well. The squads that exist now are a far cry from the yell teams that defined the original generation of cheerleaders. Today's squads do far more than just shout chants in the hopes of arousing excitement from the crowd. They also tumble, dance, jump, and perform high-risk stunts. Although they bring a great deal of excitement and energy, the addition of tumbling and stunting has raised the bar and the number of injuries as well. Thankfully, the majority of reported injuries are non-life-threatening, and the injury rates overall are decreasing. Keeping this in mind when comparing potential benefits and risks, it is the belief of many advocates that cheerleading's numerous physical, mental, and social benefits outweigh the associated risks. The number of potential believers is sure to rise as we get closer to making cheerleading even safer, namely by having the appropriate organizations grant it sports status. It has been said that with change comes opportunity, and cheerleading is certainly no exception.